Happy Convenience Store Day. My name is Phil, and you're listening to The Lip. Yes, this episode is going to be coming out on Convenience Store Day. What day is that? July 11th, 2026. But not just July 11th, 2026, all July 11ths. Why? Well, turns out that July is the 7th month of the year, and the 11th day creates a convenience store that most of us are familiar with, 7-Eleven. Now, on that same topic, I also worked at Wawa for better part of 8 years. And in this episode, I'm going to talk about some of my time while working at Wawa. Some of the things that I'm going to mostly focus on this convenience store day are going to be the things that when I was working at Wawa when I first started way back in 1999, things that did happen while I was working there, and then during that same time period when I first started, things that didn't happen. I'm going to talk about that because a lot of those things are pretty interesting when you think about the way that Wawa and most convenience stores look right now. Clearly, the focus, however, would be on 7-Eleven because, hey, they had the number which equaled the day. So we're going to definitely give them plenty of love during this episode as well. I can promise you that. A lot of what I'm going to talk about, though, like I said, is going to focus on Wawa because that's the convenience store that I know best. I think that convenience stores are so interesting, and more so than them being interesting, it's the fact that their survival depends upon people not staying too long, which is kind of fun because you figure any big department store, box store, or supermarket, they want you to go in there and walk around every aisle and stay for infinite amounts of time because they figure the longer you're in there, the farther you go, the more you're going to buy. Nah, convenience stores are definitely not made for that. They want to hit you really quick. It's sort of like I'm trying to think of a sports analogy that works between a convenience store and a regular store. Well, here we go. I got one. It's perfect. The only sport that seems to work right for the comparison between convenience stores and regular stores would be boxing. And I could think of a guy that would work very well for your traditional box store or supermarket. You think of Floyd Mayweather. He's going to dance around the ring. He's going to take his time. He's going to set you with a jab. He's going to hit you with counter punches. He's going to be willing to go the distance. He wants to take you the long road that you don't want to travel. Because the longer you're there, the more he's going to beat up on you, the better he's going to look, the worse you're going to look. Or in the case of a supermarket or a box store, like I said, the longer you're there, you're going to end up seeing things farther in the corner away from the registers in the door that maybe you weren't going to necessarily have decided to go pick up if you didn't stick around for that extra 15 minutes to get to that spot in the store. Whereas, of course, a convenience store is more like Mike Tyson. They're going to say, okay, we want you to see the coffee. We want you to grab some cigarettes. We're going to give you some cigarettes. We're going to make you a hoagie. And then you're going to get out. We're going to run right in there like Mike Tyson. Move in there, throw that bob, throw that weave a little bit, hit you in the body a couple times. Next thing you know, a quick uppercut and a hook. You're out. That's what convenience stores want to do. They want you to get in and they want you to get out. But of course, they want you to come back often. And that's the trick. They want to show you, oh yeah, come get that cup of coffee, those cigarettes, that soda, and do it every day. Where of course the big box stores and the supermarkets are like, well, come on in, spend 2 hours, get everything you need for the month, and then we'll see you next month. Total different philosophy. Convenience. We have those items that some of those big stores have, but you can just run and get them real fast and you leave. If you run out, that's the way they do it. It's a brilliant way. Now, of course, I'm recording this show on July 9th, 2026, and tomorrow is July 10th. Now, last year on July 11th, which would have been 2025, there was a bit of a kind of made things a little rough because July 11th last year wasn't a Saturday like this one is, where the show is going to be out. It was a Friday, and not just any Friday. It was National French Fry Day, which of course meant that you were able to get deals on French fries, especially my personal favorite ones um, at Chickies and Pete's. They're $1. You can go grab them for $1 during that day. And last year I did plenty of that with the kids. But of course, at the same time, because it was 7-Eleven Day, they also did their thing, which is give away the free Slurpees. And of course, they're small Slurpees, and you can go get them from different stores, but you can get one from each store. Now, I've calculated a route that usually takes about, oh, I don't know, 10 stores, give or take. And I would get, me and the kids would have about 10 Slurpees each from those different places. And it would usually be very brain freeze filled a day. But of course, like I said, last year it got more complicated because you had to save room for the Slurpees and you also had to save room for the fries. So you had to balance it out last year. It was a little tricky. Whereas this year, the fry deals are going to be on Friday and the Slurpees are going to be on Saturday. So we actually get two very entertaining days for the price of one. It's kind of cool. It really is. I think that truthfully, to have those 2 days so close together, it's just great. You can't get much better than that. And of course, right now, I believe it's time for me to ring the bell and go into the main event. Now, I am going to talk about convenience store day. And like I said earlier, very couple seconds earlier, on convenience store day, one of the most fun things for me to do is take the kids around to a bunch of different 7-Elevens and get a small Slurpee for free. It's a great thing. It's a lot of fun. And of course, like I said, you got to be careful and pace yourself because those who know, which is pretty much everybody, brain freeze is a real thing. Now, when it comes to 7-Eleven, when I was a kid in Barnegat, there was a 7-Eleven, and I would go and get, my mom would take me there and get Slurpees when I was young. I mean, I think really young. I think the oldest I was when I got a Slurpee from that 7-Eleven was probably 9, maybe in third or fourth grade. And the reason was because that 7-Eleven closed, and it was the only one in town. Now, there was a Wawa and another convenience store called Cumberland Farms at the time, and they were in business across the street from each other, and that's what we had. 7-Eleven closed in Barnegat. And don't get me wrong, there was plenty of them on Long Beach Island and in Toms River, but at that age, I wasn't going that far. And so I pretty much was relegated to Wawa and Cumberland Farms at that point. Fast forward to when I was in 7th grade. Ended up moving to the Manahawkin area, and still, from where I was, there wasn't really 7-Eleven that was accessible to me. and it was still mostly Wawa, and it was still Cumberland Farms. So I then continued on through life and really didn't go back to 7-Eleven for several years. Every once in a while, when we were in Tom's River, we might stop at 7-Eleven, but I never got a Slurpee. I just didn't. I don't know why I didn't, but I didn't. It was just for some reason. I don't know. I don't know. Maybe I was past it or something. I don't know. But it wasn't until 18 to 20 when moving into Lakehurst where there was, in fact, a 7-Eleven. And still, I chose not to get the Slurpees. And I was relatively close to Tom's River at the time, and there were 7-Elevens there. And, well, I still didn't get Slurpees. Fast forward a little bit further in time, considerably. We're talking 27, 28. I'm now getting myself established in Philadelphia. And the area where I was at didn't have any Wawa. It was crazy. No Wawa around. We're talking, in order to get to a Wawa, it was a good 15-minute, 20-minute trip in any direction. However, just down the road from where I was, there was, in fact, a 7-Eleven. Took plenty of advantage of going there and enjoyed going there. At the time, I still wasn't really a Slurpee person, and I really didn't go after them until the kids were born. At that point in time, they were maybe 2, 3, the oldest ones, and that's when I learned about the free Slurpee Day. And of course, I took full advantage of that and took the kids to get their free Slurpees, and I got one while I was there. And it was like, wow, I had been missing this for so long. Forgot what it was all about. But now here I am. And I sort of fell in love with the Slurpee all over again. But it was one of those situations where I was going to Dunkin' Donuts a lot more at that time, and I was drinking a lot of Coladas, strawberry to be specific. And a Slurpee was good from time to time, but it wasn't something that I would go after all the time. Fast forward a little bit more. The kids are a little older, and they can handle a little bit more sugar. What happens now is I've decided that, you know what? I'm going to make up for all those years and all those Slurpees that I hadn't had before. And probably a month and a half prior to Slurpee Day or Convenience Store Day, 7-Eleven, I started looking around everywhere within a pretty decent radius to find all the 7-Elevens that I possibly could. And I mapped out a whole bunch. And I said, okay, this is what we're going to do. We're going to go to as many of these places as we can. And along the way, if we've hit all the ones that I know about, we'll drive around a little longer to see about getting some that I haven't found yet. And thus became the tradition of me taking the kids all over the place to go to 7-Eleven to get the Slurpees. Now, I know what you're thinking, or at least I know what I hope you're thinking. You said you worked at Wawa for almost 8 years. Correct. Probably 2 days shy of 8 years before I left. Why didn't you just get the ices? Well, simple. Ices are not Slurpees. Yes, they are frozen, carbonated, flavored, cold drinks that can give you brain freeze, just like a Slurpee. Yes. But Coke makes icy. 7-Eleven is a specific thing. And they've got the patent on Slurpee, and I believe they may even have brain freeze. Who knows? But truthfully, 7-Eleven has a much larger flavor catalog than you can get with ices, and a lot of them are better. Personally, I like the flavors of a cherry icy. Not, I don't like the cherry icy as much as I like a cherry Slurpee. The flavor is different, syrup is different, it's just different. So that's why I can truthfully say that there is a big difference between an icy and a Slurpee. Slurpees are far better than ices. Always have been, always will be. And to my knowledge, I'm pretty sure that Wawa has not started or will ever start giving away small ices on 7-Eleven Day. They're just not going to do that. They'll give away free coffee from time to time, but as I've come to find out during my 8-year tenure there, it was a trap. Where's Admiral Akbar at? It's a trap. Because every time that they've decided to give away free coffee during the tenure that I worked there, once the free coffee sale was over, they ended up raising the price every single time. So it's a trap. You get to have free coffee for a little while, but when that coffee comes back, it's going to be more. It's just the trap that they've always set. But that's how they played it. Now, talking about convenience stores, I'm going to talk about one of my favorite stories that I haven't talked about while working at Wawa. It is about hot dogs. Yeah, I know. Joey Chestnut just won the mustard yellow belt again for the 18th time this past 4th of July by eating 66 hot dogs. Crazy number. Not as good as he would have liked, but it was really hot. What are you going to do? It takes a toll on you eating that many hot dogs in a heat. But this hot dog story is one that I've had in my head, and I remember it, lived it, was crazy, but I never actually told it. And I figure, what's a better day to tell a story about hot dogs when I'm talking about a convenience store hot dog specifically than on convenience store day? And it's not even just one story, it's two different stories. Actually, is it two? No, I'm sorry. I have three hot dog stories. My goodness. I'll just remember right now. It's not one, it's not two, but it's three. Ding, 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 match is over. Three hot dog stories. Where are we going to begin? I think we're going to begin with the one that made me smile the most. Well, they all make me smile, but one of them's a little off, but it's still funny. We'll start with the executive hot dog stories, I like to say, because this one certainly is a perfect convenience store day story because it does in fact connect convenience stores. So here we go. As happened to be on this particular day, one of the executives from the corporate office at Wawa decided to grace us with his presence. And he showed up at my store. And of course, the manager has to be tied at the hip with this guy when he shows up. And it's not like it's a very big tour that he's taking because, man, not only is it a Wawa, generally a small building to begin with, but the store that I worked at the time was a small store. It wasn't a gas store. This is before the gas stores. And this executive is walking around talking to my manager, looking at things, critiquing things, complaining about stuff. That's what they do. They always have to go into the stores and say, well, some things are good, but it's usually that there's a balance that they usually typically have. And they say there's always room for improvement. Those corporate guys are always like that. And I don't know if they still are, but back then they were. Their ratio of compliments to critique would usually be, oh, 60-40, 65-35, heavy on the critique versus the compliment. They're gonna say, hey, we think you could do this better. You should do this better. You should do that better. They're always trying to get us to do better, and the compliments are always on the lower side. Always. This particular day, it was about time to change out the hot dogs, and I was about to go change out the hot dogs. This executive was talking to my manager, and I was on my way to doing it, and my manager said, "Well, yeah, okay, I know we have to do this, we have to do that," and he's like, "We're just going to change out the hot dogs first." The executive then said, "Don't worry about the hot dogs. If the customer wants a hot dog, they can go to 7-Eleven." He actually said that in the middle of a Wawa store. If the customer wants a hot dog, they can just go to 7-Eleven. And he said that in the middle of the store with customers around. Then he proceeded to have somebody do whatever it was that he was looking at instead of the hot dogs. He just simply said, "We're not going to worry about them hot dogs. And if the customer complains about the hot dogs, well, go to 7-Eleven." That is crazy, the fact that he said that. But that's what his prerogative was at the time. Go to 7-Eleven if you want a hot dog. I want you to do this. Blah, 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 blah. And we just moved on. Now, I have a story which is a little icky about hot dogs, but it's what they are. Now, I have to set this up in order to get to the point. I start off by saying those warmers where you go into Wawa and get the hot dogs, those warmers have hot dogs in them, and those hot dogs are coated for 4 hours. Meaning, it usually takes about, I don't know, 5-10 minutes in order to get the hot dog right off the grill so that it's not burned and it looks good. Then it goes in that then it goes into a bun in a container to go put that container inside that warmer, and it's allowed to stay in that warmer for up to 4 hours. At 4 hours, they get taken out and written off and thrown away. Now, I worked at two small stores at one time. My one manager actually managed both of those small stores, and this is a point where he was getting himself set up to end up going to work at a gas store. But before then, he managed two small stores, and the hot dogs were in great demand at one store and not at the other. The small store that I worked at, were for the most of the time, was in Lakehurst, called 389. Really small store, and we would standardly put out about 7 hot dogs, and this is during lunch rush, the busiest time of the day. We would have about 7, 8 regular hot dogs, and we would have 2 quarter-pound hot dogs. Now, when the 4 hour period expired, usually we would have somewhere around 4 to 5 hot dogs still in there, and maybe one of the quarter-pounders. So we would throw away a lot of hot dogs versus how many we sold. Now, the other store that my manager ran was 472. It was a little bit farther west in Manchester. That store was located in one of my favorite locations. It was off of a road that I would like to tell everybody when I lived in New Jersey, when they asked, I'd give them the description. If you didn't know where you were from, if you didn't know where you were, you wouldn't want to break down. This is off of this road where the store was on an intersection of a couple of big roads, Route 70 and Route 539, where they intersected. And let me tell you how, from that position, if you went east, you could go towards Seaside. If you went south, you could go towards the Long Beach Island area. If you went north, you could end up going to Great Adventure. And west was Philadelphia. If you went far enough in any of those directions, you would end up getting to those places. So this is a spot where people can converge from a lot of places. Not to mention, just like Lakehurst, um, that store was right by a part of the Joint Air Force Base right now. The Navy was right there. Now, if you were to go to the other two pieces of that base, the McGuire Air Force Base or Fort Dix, the Army base, which is now just one giant mega base with all three of those services there, the entrances to Dix, Fort Dix, and to McGuire Air Force Base would be in either of those directions as well. So you could get to the entrance of any of those three bases from that intersection, depending on which base you wanted to go to. So this is a high traffic area during certain points. Like rush hour, you can have a lot of people going there. And in the mornings, like I said, going to Philadelphia, going to the bases, going to Long Beach Island, going to Seaside, going to Adventure during the summertime, this is crazy. And even during regular time, winter and fall, people not going to Great Adventure, there's still going to be a lot of people going to those bases and to those spots. And as a result, yes, I am talking about hot dogs. This store, 472, would put up something like 30 hot dogs. And they would maintain about that many. Because the 4 hour code, man, you might throw away one hot dog, maybe two. And that store also had the other things that Wawa had at the time, which was spicy sausage and kibasi. And they'd put like two or three of them in the case. They'd have like 30 hot dogs, give or take, like 4 or 5 quarter pounders, and two or three of those spicy sausage and kibasi. And they'd still only throw away maybe, at best, 3 or 4 out of 30 total product. They just ran through hot dogs crazy. They did. And you knew that that was going to be the case. And it wouldn't be more than maybe an hour of the hot dogs in the case before you started getting it down to around 7 or 8. The number that the small store that I worked at primarily would put out to begin with. It would take about an hour before they got to that number. They would just blow through these things like crazy. And by the end of the 4 hours, like I said, you might be throwing away maybe 2 to 3, at most 5. They sold a lot of hot dogs. A lot of times they wouldn't have any throwaway. They would just keep running right through them. Now, having said that, going back to the small store that I worked at, 389 on Lakehurst, there was a gentleman, and I will call him a gentleman, who would usually come into the store around 4 o'clock ish. And I would usually be working 3 to 11 shift. And this is before I got into management. He would come in and he would go to that hot dog case and he would pick up a hot dog, either a quarter pounder or a regular hot dog. Didn't make any difference. He would come in, he'd get one, and he'd go. Now, during that time, when he would come in, it would usually be a rush of people would come in, and I would be constantly working on making coffee. I would constantly be making sandwiches and hoagies and getting people soup, whatever they wanted out of the deli area. And typically, by the time that rush had ended, that guy had already come into the store, grabbed his hot dog, and left. And that rush would usually be over at that point. And he'd typically be the only guy to go in there and get a hot dog. I would then go over to the hot dog case because I hadn't gotten a look at it and check the date on the hot dog so I would know what I needed to do with them. And of course, usually the hot dogs would have expired by like 3 or 4 o'clock, where the guy had just gotten a hot dog and it was already expired. Sometimes the hot dogs that he would go and grab would be expired by 3 when I first got there. Sometimes they'd be expired by 3:30. A couple times they were expired by like 2, and the shift before didn't get rid of them before I got there, and they sat there for 2 more hours. And this guy would still go up there, and he would still go get the hot dog, and he would still eat it, and it was crazy. It happened like that for months, at least 8 months, maybe 10. It wasn't quite a year, but it was a long period of time that this guy would come in, constantly get a bad hot dog. I don't know why I'm laughing about it. It's if anything, I should have been a little bit more cognizant of the fact that this guy was getting bad hot dogs every day, and he was. Because after he left, after everything settled down, I would then go check the hot dogs, realize they're all bad, and throw them all out. And he had already bought one of those bad hot dogs every single time, without fail, every time. And as a result of this, um, I would then have to go make new hot dogs. Now, we were in the midst of a management change during that 8 to 10 month period of time. The manager who ran both of those stores had gone on to go manage one singular gas store, which is funny because that gas store had about 65, 70 employees, whereas the two small stores he worked at that he was managing had a combined 30. So that store had like twice as many employees than the two that he was running. But that's neither here nor there. We're not going to worry about that. We're talking about this guy with these bad hot dogs. Now, the new manager who came into the store realized that we didn't have either the spicy sausage or the kibasi, and he started ordering that in that time span. Now, closer to the end, the 8 to 10 month mark, I don't remember when it was. Like I said, it was somewhere around 8 or 10 months. This guy was coming in. He then, instead of getting a hot dog, noticed that there was a kibasi in the case, and instead of giving a hot dog, he grabbed the kibasi because out of the corner of my eye, I noticed there was a kibasi in there with those other hot dogs when I was making coffee, subs, sandwiches, all that stuff for the customers. He went, he grabbed it, he bought it, he left. I go, I check the times on all the stuff that was in there, and as always, it was bad. It was bad by another couple hours, maybe 2 to 3 hours. It was a longer time than normal. I think it was at 1 o'clock that they went bad, and they were in there all that time because they'd been so busy that they just left them. So the guy went and got a bad kibasi that was a couple hours old, and he bought it. My theory is he ate it. Hopefully he didn't die, but I imagine he probably got sick by it. I don't know because I can't tell you because after he got that kibasi, he never came back. That was it. Last time I ever saw the man after he got that bad kibasi that one day. Never saw him again. And I don't blame him. Because I don't blame him. Because every time he went in there for about 8 to 10 months, he kept getting bad hot dogs every single time. A hot dog that had been sitting in that case for hours longer than it should. And then he just got the one last kibasi, and that thing was in there longer than it ever should have been. And as a result, he said, forget it. And he never ever came back to that store the entire time that I worked there. Not once. Oh, man. Now, the last hot dog story I have, I'm telling you, it's another interesting one. Because it was when I was in management, or was I just a shift runner, just below management? One of the two. Probably management because I was the boss at the point in the store. So most likely it was a management thing because I was looking at the cases that the hot dogs came in, and people would say, "Oh, they're called hot dog boats." And of course, at the time, I was in my lower 20s, mid 20s, and I had to know if they call these things boats, do they float? Logical, right? A boat would float, right? So, what did I do? filled up the back sink, put the stopper in, and as I was getting ready to throw away the hot dogs that were going bad, I took a hot dog that was inside the boat and I put it in the water. And guess what? The hot dog inside the hot dog boat floated. And I was like, huh, that's pretty cool. Then it dawned on me. The hot dog is in a bun. If the plastic container is a boat, just like anybody who's on a boat, you're usually going to have a life jacket on. Now, the hot dog has a bun because in the boat, the bun could be the life preserver. So, would the hot dog float with the bun on? I had to know. So I pulled the hot dog out of the water with the boat. I took it out and I put the hot dog and in the bun in the water, and the hot dog still floated because it was in the bun. So it's like, well, okay. Apparently, the bun is definitely a life preserver. So if the hot dog falls out of the boat and into the water, it's got its bun on, which is the life preserver, so it'll still float. It'll be fine. Now, I didn't take it that one step further of taking it out of the bun, and I regret that now. I never did take the hot dog out of the bun and just put it in the water and see if it floated. I never did that. But as far as I can tell you for certain, the boat will float and the life preserver works. So the hot dog will be perfectly safe if it fell out of the boat into the water as long as it had its bun or its life preserver on. That was fun. I used to show people that whenever they started after, because that's what I knew when I was in management. I would mess around when we had a little bit of time, and I would show the new employees that, yeah, the hot dog boat that float, take the hot dog falls out of the boat, it's fine because his life preserver will keep it safe. It'll still float. I would show every new employee that, and I used to have a blast with it. But yeah, that's the end of my hot dog stories. um, Now I'm gonna get into things during the time that I started working there that Wawa did, and some of the things that Wawa didn't do when I first started working there in 1999. This is a crazy list. When you think about the stuff that you can see when you walk around inside of a Wawa today, thinking about the stuff that they don't do anymore versus the stuff that they did do back then, man, it's madness. Only word I could use to describe it. It's wild. It really is. It's absolutely wild. Total madness. Now, I'm going to start with the things that Wawa did when I first started working there. And it's a crazy list of things. And when you think about the stuff that I'm about to say, and then you consider the stuff that they do today, man, it's just crazy. It really is. The first thing that I figured was a absolute did when I first started working there was they had a full functioning deli, just like you would have at a supermarket. However, it would be smaller, but it was still a deli. Turkey, ham, all kinds of cheeses, roast beef. It was inside the case and waiting to be sliced. If you came up, you asked for a quarter pound of bologna, boom, quarter pound of bologna. We would do it for you right then. Yeah, that was an incredible period of time because not only were we slicing lunch meat for you to take home, but at the time, the lunch meat for the hoagies and sandwiches, most of it was sliced when I first walked through the door. We had to cut the turkey and the roast beef. Anything else we had to cut? No. Yeah. Anything else that was in the case that you wanted on a sandwich could be made. But we specifically had to cut the turkey and the roast beef, and we would put it in pans, and it would be then used for the sandwiches the next day. We would do it overnight, and that's how it would work like that. Also, the Italian hoagies, the meat for that would come in packages. We didn't have to slice it, although there was a couple of those meats that we had in the deli case that we would slice if somebody wanted it. But it got to the point where nobody wanted it, so it was discontinued. But it still came separate in packages, and we had to put those together in order to make the presets for the Italian hoagies. And those would also then be placed inside the refrigerator and ready for sandwiches the next day. We'd have to do that. It's one of the things that we did overnight was cut the turkey and ham. No, cut the turkey and roast beef and put together the Italian presets. The ham, the entire time when I got to the store, was always in preset, pre-cut packages. It just came to the store cut already and ready to use for the hoagies. Ham was always like that when I first got there. Now, before I got there, a nice lady who worked there, Miss Pat, who has since passed on, great lady, she explained to me that prior to me getting there was a point where they had to also cut the ham. But not only the ham, the lettuce, the tomatoes, the onions, everything that was getting ready to be used for the sandwiches had to be cut fresh overnight in order to get ready to make the sandwiches. All of it was cut because we had the slicers, and that's what they did. They cut all of that stuff to get it ready for the next day. But by the time I got there, the tomatoes, the lettuce, the onions, they were already pre-cut and packaged, and we would just be able to use them. But that's how it used to be. Like now, they don't cut anything. All that stuff, the turkey, the ham, the roast beef, everything, lettuce, tomato, all that stuff is in packs. And it comes off the truck, and they can just dump it into the Bain Marie and make their sandwiches right out of there. That's what they do now. They didn't when I first started. Another thing that they did, they had a pickle barrel. Now, I'm going to lean back for this just a little bit. Pickle barrel. We all remember those when we were kids, most of us anyway, who were listening to this show. Remember the pickle barrel. You go to a deli at the supermarket or convenience store, and there would be a barrel full of pickles. Just what it says. Now, the ones at Wawa were convenient and inconvenient. Now, I say they were convenient because, hey, you can go in there, grab the tongs, pull the pickle out if you want it, and go. But they were very inconvenient for the fact that those things were at the level where kids who were walking around who were between the age of 3 and 6 could stick their hand inside the pickle barrel. And we all know that some of the most disgusting humans on earth are between the ages of 3 and 6. It's just a fact. They pick up everything, they put everything in their mouth, they hold on all kinds of stuff, and they are no strangers to wanting to stick their hands in liquid, especially if they open up something and they go, oh, what's this? The first instinct is to touch it. I don't know how many times I had to throw away all the pickles in the pickle barrel because some 4-year-old thought it would be a fun thing to open up the pickle barrel because they like pickles. So let me go grab a pickle and just reach in with their bare hand, stick it as far as they can inside the pickle barrel, and pull one out. Of course, the 4-year-old probably just got done picking their nose because that's what they do. And needless to say, when I started, we had them, and maybe 2 years into me being there, we didn't anymore because it was really disgusting. And that was before COVID. That's what happens. You mean if the pickle barrel was a little higher, so that those little kids couldn't stick their hand in there, that might have worked a little better. But even still, people are disgusting in general. So there's a pretty good chance that, especially in the small store that I worked in, that people who are going to be moving through on that road, I mean, man, there's plenty of construction workers, and at the time, there was no bathroom, so you know nobody was washing their hands, and hand sanitizer was iffy during that period in 1999. So the likelihood that somebody would stick their hand inside the pickle barrel and their hand be completely clean was zero. And I can't imagine how many people actually did stick their hand in there and pulled out a pickle that I didn't see. Disgusting. Pickle barrels were something that we had back then. Um, when I started, we also sold money orders. Well, I didn't sell them anymore, but we did when I started. The manager was the only person who could refill the money order machine. That's it. And you had to do it right, because if you did it wrong, you could print the money order out and it would be cockeyed, and it was just crazy. And I've seen it a couple times when they missed the not lined up right, and the money order would print funny. It's awful. Because then you got to take the money order. You got to, at the time, you had to void it out, and it was a mess. But when I first started, early on in 1999, we stole money orders. Um, Also, we took paper food stamps, physical food stamps, not the cards you have today, but physical paper food stamps were a thing that we would take at the store. Physical food stamps. That was interesting, because later on nowadays they have the cards, but before, just like the cash, they took food stamps. Um, um, Another thing that we had was in the back. They had ashtrays because we could smoke inside the store. Of course, back then, everybody could smoke everywhere in 1999 still. And Wawa itself actually provided ashtrays for the employees. It's crazy. I never smoked, but Wawa would have those things where you could order them. If your ashtray was no good, you could order a new one. They would give them to you at that point. It was interesting. But you could smoke inside the store. As we know now, you can't smoke within 5 football fields of an open air hot dog cart. That's just the way it is now. um, Sometimes when you get old, can't read your notes quite as good as you used to. Um, the coffee pots. Right now, you go into a Wawa and they have those decanter urn things that you use to get your coffee with. Prior to that, when I first started, we actually had actual coffee pots. We would brew the pots, we'd put the pot on the warmer. And they stopped doing that. And some people look, why did they stop doing that? Because people were clumsy and they dropped the coffee pots? No. In the entire time of 8 years that I worked at Wawa, I personally never saw any customer or employee drop a coffee pot. Let me say that one more time. In the 8 years that I personally worked at Wawa, and I'm going to really up the ante on this. During 8 years, I worked in one, two, three, four, five. Let's see, one, two, three, four, five. Yeah, I worked in 5 different stores. One store I only worked in one day. Another store I worked in for 2 weeks. And then the other three I worked in the rest of the time that I worked at Wawa. They were in various places in New Jersey. And I worked with different people in those stores. Young, old, my age. I've never, and I stress, never saw one person, employee or customer, drop a coffee pot. Not one. Not one. And I'm just amazing about that now because in my mind, I'm thinking about it, and it just dawned on me that I never saw anybody ever drop a coffee pot. None. Nobody. Never. Even in the back when we were cleaning them, and they had that really strong soap in order to get the coffee out of the pots. Because if that got on a handle or something like that, it'd be a little slick. But I never saw anybody do it, and I never did it. Never dropped one. But the reason why they don't have those regular coffee pots now it's nothing to do with people dropping the coffee pots. It has everything to do with the coffee pots themselves. Now, scientific principle, what happens when glass maintains heat and continuously becomes hot and cool and hot and cool? Eventually, that glass gets weak. And what happened that I did see on a number of occasions is I saw coffee pots come off of the burner from being made or from being sitting on the warmer in the front where people could take it. People would grab the coffee pot and either the plastic handle would separate from the glass or the actual glass itself would have gotten so weak from the heat exposure over time where the glass would blow out and the coffee pot would actually explode. And I've seen that a bunch of times. Personally, it's happened to me about 7 to 10 times where the coffee pot, you grab the coffee pot and the handle would come off and the pot would just drop because the weakness of the plastic and the glass over time with that heat, it just separated. Or a couple times the pot would just boom, would blow out on one of the sides. It would just explode. I've seen it happen to my employees when I was working there. I saw it happen to myself, and I saw it happen to about 3 or 4 customers where they would grab the pot and it would just boom, blow out. And needless to say, that's a definite insurance problem. So rather than continue to allow fate to be tempted and wait for that day when a customer gets scalded by a completely fresh pot of coffee that just so happens to have gotten to its weakest point and blows up, what do? They got rid of it. And they used the decanters, which was what was used for the flavored coffees the entire time that I worked there. Now, those decanters never had any issues except for when people dropped them. Now, those people dropped it, and those people banged into stuff. And what the way that those worked back then, I assume it's probably the same now, is that plastic container had a glass on the inside, and that's what kept the coffee warm and then insulated by the plastic on the outside. And then you push the top and you pump the coffee out. Now, there's plenty of times where I'd see people messing around, employees, and they bang them together and the glass would break on the inside and they were no good. But the key thing is it would break on the inside and you wouldn't have to worry about coffee spilling all over the customer or the employee. Whereas the coffee pot, when they blew up, that stuff, glass and hot coffee would be all over the place. So it made sense that they stopped making the coffee pots. It really did. Because at the end of the day, man, it was just a problem that they solved very easily by just eliminating the problem. Training centers used to have training centers, and those were good because you'd go there for 3 days before you started working, and you would have the fundamentals of what needed to be done inside the store, and you go into a Wawa and you'd be more comfortable. You would understand, okay, this is the slicer, this is how that thing works, this is the deli. You know, it would show, we have an idea how they would show you how to make the pots of coffee, because some people like myself, I never made a pot of coffee until I worked at Wawa. And I walked in there with some basic fundamental knowledge of how to do these things. And it made that first couple days a lot easier because you had a base in which to learn. And then everybody else could show you other stuff when you got there. But you had the basics, the very foundation of what you needed to learn. I used to love the training center because it's also a place where they would have management training, and you could use it for store meetings. It was a good place, but since I've been there, before I left, they closed the training centers, and what they would do is they made store trainers. Sometimes it would be a shift runner, and their job was to know how to train people in the store, and they would get the new employees in store, and they would have to train them. Also, all management had to go through the training program as well, so that they could also train employees. So now, not only were you responsible for running the store, you also had to train somebody who's never been in a store. And I always hated that because I personally tried to give that person as much attention as I possibly could, the new people, but I had to make sure the store ran and functioned as it was supposed to while showing this person what they needed to do. It was a balancing act that didn't make any sense. And I'm going to put it just that way. It didn't make any sense because having to train somebody on how to do something, the most basic things, when you have 10 or 15 customers running around the store and you have to make sure the cappuccino machine's filled and money is inside the register and the cooler's filled and the garbage is shaken out, and you're trying to show this person how to make a bag of meatballs in the middle of all that. Like, I personally hated it. Training center was great because now you could do all that stuff before they get there, and then you could tell them to do it, and you can give them refreshers, or you could show them where things were. It's different to show people where stuff is placed than it is to show them how to do things. And of course, I felt that anybody I trained, no matter how good they ended up at the end of the day, I felt that no matter how well I showed them what to do, I personally felt that they were cheated because they didn't get my full attention as I was trying to train them. They never got it, no matter what they may say. Oh, he showed me this. Da, da, da. I always felt that everybody that I trained didn't get my full attention. They did because they were, especially the new people specifically, did not get my full attention because I had all the other stuff to do. Now, when I was training other people who were learning how to do some management stuff, I would be able to give them more of my attention because they were literally doing the thing that I was actively doing at the time. And it was easier for me to show them what I was actively doing rather than to have, and they already had a basic understanding of how to do the other stuff, so I didn't have to go and put down that first layer of concrete in order to build the foundation. They already had it, so I just was starting to build the building. So it was easy, as opposed to showing somebody who didn't have that concrete. I had to make that foundation. I don't think that personally I gave anybody as much time as they should have when they first got to the building and tried to learn. I don't. And a couple of people said, "Oh, you trained me well." I'm like, "Thank you," is what I pretty much would say. But you don't have to. You don't have to say that because I personally never felt it. Training centers were good. They should be back. I don't know if they are. It would be nice if they were, because it would make your employees a lot more confident when they start working. It just what it was. And the last thing that they did was they had small stores most of the time. When I got there in 1999, Now, this is going to actually transition into the things that they didn't have when I started. I don't know if you've seen the stores, if you live over here in the East Coast, if you're listening to this, um, but there's in mini mart plazas, you'll see them around Philadelphia, New Jersey, that area, Delaware. You'll see a store that's located most typically on the left if you're looking at it straight ahead in a plaza. And it's, I don't know why it's typically on the left, but most of the time they're on the left. Let's start with that, right? As you're facing it in these mini mart plazas. Like almost all of them are on the left. Others are by themselves independently. But there is a specific pattern of stone on the exterior, and it's totally recognizable because that's what Wawa used to look like all the time. Small to the left of a small plaza, or a standalone by itself with this specific stone covering on the outside. That was the front of Wawa. And you would look at those small stores and you'd know that that was at one time a Wawa because that's what they did. And most of the time, when people take over those to rent them, they don't change the exterior. It is what it is. They just keep it, and you just know that that's what a Wawa looked like. Every single time you go to a Wawa back then, it would have that same exterior. And like I said, most of the time, it would be on the left of the mini mart, the mini plazas. And I don't know why it was always on the left, but most of the time it was on the left. I want to say seriously, a lot of times it was on the left. I don't know if it was just something that the Wawa corporate people thought that just in order to maintain consistency that much further, if it wasn't in an independent building, standalone, that they would put it on the left so that you would feel that much more comfortable going into it because every time you went to a Wawa, it was on the left. But that's kind of what they did. And during that time period, that's what they had. They had small stores in 1999. Now, I'm going to go into things that they didn't. They didn't have gas stores like they do now. In fact, in 1996, 3 years before I started working there, they came up with their first gas store in Delaware. And they liked it so much that by 2004, they made an initiative to only make gas stores. And that's why those brick faced buildings on the left and independently, you can know that they used to be Wawa if you knew. Like, there's a whole generation of people now, because of 2004, who didn't have any idea that that is what Wawa used to be. They only know them as the big gas stores. And that's why, in my mind, when people say, oh, you're going in there and you're getting these gas station food, and I'm like, well, Wawa wasn't a gas station at first. And in general, it was actually a dairy farm. It still really is. They're not gas. They sell gas. It's a lost leader, as they say. It's something to bring you there. But gas is not what it is. It is not a gas station. It is not. Like the old Tiger Mart with what was it? Exxon. That was a gas station, and they happened to put a convenience store there, so you can go in there and get cigarettes and soda. Wawa was not that. Wawa was the coffee, the cigarettes. That's what they were, and then they added the gas. So when you eat food from there, people say, "Oh, it's gas station food." Nah, Wawa's not gas station food. It's the other way around. You can get gas at Wawa, but Wawa's not a gas station. It's really not. In its core, it's not. It's a dairy farm. The one thing that they did that they didn't do when I worked at Wawa that really aggravated me was they didn't allow men to have beards. Hated it. Had to shave all the time. All the time. And for me, I would always get razor bumps if I used a metal razor, and I couldn't get it the way that they really wanted it by using an electric razor, and I just didn't care. I just did whatever I could. Stayed far enough away from the executives when they showed up. Management who cared, I'd stay far enough away from them to not make it look like I wasn't clean shaven all the time. But I hate it. I go in a Wawa now and I see a guy that looks like ZZ Top. And I'm like, what? Drove me nuts. Absolutely, still to this day, drives me nuts to think that they literally had that going for them. And I'm like, you gotta be kidding me. ZZ Top could work at Wawa and not have to worry about anything right now. Whereas when I first started there is no way that they would ever even consider it because they'd have to shave. That's no, no way. But they didn't allow guys to have beards back then. I hated it. Totally hated it. One thing that I didn't hate was that they didn't sell lottery tickets. And I'm glad that I don't have to worry about it because, as one of my former coworkers would say at one point in time, when they started adding different machines and different stuff, he said, "Oh, it's just one more thing to clean." And truthfully, that would be one more thing to clean, and it would be one more thing to have to deal with. And when you're already dealing with everything else, adding one more thing just you get to a point where it's like, okay, now I got one more thing to think about, and it just frustrates you a little bit. But it's doable. But I'm glad I didn't have to do it. And in 1999, I didn't have to do it. Oh yeah, these are my favorite ones. These are always fun. In the initial time that I started working at Wawa, there were a couple other things that they didn't have, and these are fun. Actually, these are really fun. Obviously, if you're of a certain age, you know they didn't have the touchscreens, and that's fun because the touchscreens and all the other two things I'm going to say, they all came about roughly at the same time. And the touchscreens were great because all the people who worked there used to have to use a pen or a pencil and had a piece of paper, and they had to write the order down for the customer that they had for their hoagie, and then they had to tear off the paper, give it to the person. They would then take that paper to the register and pay cash. Pay cash, and then you would get their food. And of course, those times people would come up and they would say, "Hey, I didn't want that." What do you mean you didn't want it? I told you I didn't want lettuce, but you said it, and I marked it off. Nah, I didn't want lettuce. I didn't say it. And then you're like, okay, make it over again without the lettuce. Now, with the touchscreens, or even back then when they first came out, we all smiled because a customer would come up and say, "Hey, I didn't want that lettuce on there." "Oh yeah, you did." "I didn't want it." "Well, you put it on there." I didn't touch it. I didn't even interact with you, and that's another thing. Because realistically, the people in the deli before had to they had to verbally speak to every customer because they had to talk to them and tell them about the list and everything else. Tell them all the stuff that was on the sandwiches, the soups, all of it. They had to tell them everything. But because of the touchscreen, there is literally only interaction with the person, um, the customer, and the person behind the deli if they have a special order, or if the customer isn't there and you're reading off the numbers of the tickets of the food that's made. So it's very limited for the deli, and it just makes life a little bit easier for them. But when I was there, no, had to talk to everybody. Absolutely had to. And I'll have to admit that that was important as far as getting to know a bunch of different people and handling a bunch of different people. And it was very useful for me when I started working in the prison because you kind of understood how to talk to people a little bit better. And for other people, they may have had communication skills that they learned from other spots, but me, it was actually working at Wawa, talking to different customers, good and bad, that allowed me to be able to be comfortable interacting with the inmates. Sounds weird, but hey, it's the truth. Another thing that they did not have when I first started there was they didn't have, like I said, cash. I made a point of saying cash because when I first started, for a long time, we didn't take credit. Probably half the time I was there. I guess I started in 1999, and I don't believe we started taking credit cards until 2003 or 4, one of those times. So it was more than half, around half the time before I started there, before Wawa took credit cards. It was a long time. We're talking half, almost, at least half of my tenure that I worked at Wawa. There was no credit cards. It was all cash. And boy, cards didn't exist. And I remember that night because I was working overnight when the people came to install the credit card unit. I was there. The same thing when they were installing the touchscreens. I was there. And like I said, it's weird the fact that you think about it now. Back then, nobody would walk up with a credit card. You would always have a wad of cash, pull it out, and say, "Here you go. Here's $5 for the cigarettes and coffee. Okay, here you go. Boom, boom. Here's your change." And yes, $5 for cigarettes and coffee, and you get change if you handed me a $5 bill. Yeah, back then it was possible. Now it's like $10 for a pack of cigarettes and like $2 for a cup of coffee, and then you just go and take your card and you touch the card reader and you walk away because you paid. Like I said, it was weird. They would look at you funny back then if you pull out a credit card, but now we don't take credit cards. Now, if you pull out a $10 bill, they look at you a little funny because they expect you to have a card. But that's the way it was. And probably the last thing that we didn't have that they do have now. When I first started, there were no cameras in the building. None. And I know what you're thinking. Oh no, Wawa had some sort of secret cameras in there. No, they didn't. There was no cameras in the building until about 2003 or 4. There were no cameras. And being a convenience store, you would think that cameras would be a good thing to have. It would have been. Truthfully, it would have solved a bunch of problems as far as what customers were doing, how they were acting. But truthfully, employees, you would have been able to catch them stealing stuff. But there was no cameras from 99 until, like I said, 2003 or 4. I can't remember exactly when. But I do remember being there because I was working overnights when they installed the cameras as well. And I was one of the people that they told, okay, this is here, check this out, showed me the monitors, I saw all that stuff. Now, some people will be like, oh, the cameras, you're going to try to catch thieves. Well, partially. The other thing that you're trying to catch is trying to watch your employees. Don't ever let anybody lie to you and tell you that when they put cameras in their business, that the camera's sole focus is to watch the customer, because it's not. Who's in the store longer, the customers or the employees? The employees are. Truthfully, the cameras are really, I'm going to say, when it comes to cameras in a store, it's probably 60, 40, maybe even that 65-35 number, watching the employees more than watching the customers. Because, like I said, who's more in the store than the customers? It's the employees, which means that they're the ones who are probably going to be stealing more than the customers because, first of all, they know what they want. They've been there all that time. They know where things are. It just seems like maybe you should keep an eye on the people who are there as opposed to the ones who are just in and out. Granted, in and out is a problem, but I'd rather trust that the employees are doing good things and be able to look in the camera and see it rather than um, give them the benefit of the doubt. Meanwhile, they are cleaning you out. But truthfully, yeah, there were no cameras. Now, Some people will be like, wow, that's not very safe. Well, convenience stores aren't very safe in general. But in the stores that I worked in, specifically the small store in Lakehurst, good old 389, you were probably safer there than you are in most places when that store was open. Because that store was in Lakehurst, which is a borough inside of Manchester Township. Now, Lakehurst was a mile square town, and it's right outside that big base I was telling you about. So, you had this layer of coverage because it was on a fairly main road, Route 70. You would have the borough police of Lakehurst. You had the township of Manchester police that would be there, right? You're in Ocean County, and it's a major road, and at least 3 or 4 times a week, the sheriff's department of Ocean County would be in the store. And I believe I said that Route 70 was a place that was frequented by the state police. And like I said, the military base was just on the outside of where my store was, meaning the military police frequented the store all the time. So, on an average basis, at any point in the time in that small store, you could guarantee a good guy with a gun will be in that store every hour. At least one good guy with a gun every hour. In a vehicle that was clearly marked. We're not talking about every once in a while you'd see an undercover um, state trooper would come by, but that was rare. Most of the time, they'd have the big old red lights on top, it's on the side, New Jersey State Police. You would know that it was a state trooper most of the time when they showed up. Of course, Lakehurst and Manchester Police and the base, the military police, they had their military vehicle. They had the Manchester and Lakehurst police cars. So you would know that that was, in fact, a good guy with a gun at the store. And don't get me started on early morning rush between 6 and 9. You would have military police, you'd have military, just soldiers in general. You would have state troopers going through the Manchester, the Lakehurst police would be there getting their coffee. Um, Occasionally, again, like I said, you would end up catching um, sheriff's department. They were all there, and there was times when you could go into the store and there'd be like 10 guys, 10 good guys with guns in there, all different types of agencies. Like I said, there was times when you would have all kinds of agencies. And my favorite day, this is a day that I'll love beyond anything else, and I'm gonna smile because this was a lot of fun. Because in my mind, it would be one of those situations where you would be the stupidest person in the world. You would literally put the handcuffs on yourself and just get into the car because it was one of the ultimate days. Um, One of the inside the store there were 3 base police. I'll never forget it. I counted them because it was incredible because I was working during the day that day. Um, there was 3 base police officers in the store getting their coffee. Um, a Manchester lieutenant and 2 officers. So that's, yeah, 2 officers. We were talking to both of them. So that's one, two, and the lieutenant is 3, and then 3. So 6 between military and Manchester. There was 2 Lakehurst police officers, a sergeant, and one of the officers with him. So that's 8. And then 2 other guys that I didn't know from the state police. There was a couple state troopers in there. So that was 10. And then there was who was it? There was one guy. It was a sheriff's department guy. That's 11. And then this is what was really fun about that day. One of the officers who had formerly worked for Lakehurst was on duty at his new job, and his new job was he was a Secret Service agent. And I looked at him, I nodded at him, His name was Ed. Looked at him. Hey, how you doing? So there was Ed, Secret Service, State Police, Military Police, Manchester Police, Lakehurst Police, Sheriff's Department, Military Police, all in the store at one time. And of course, I was a young guy. I was like 22, 20, about that age, 23, somewhere in the neighborhood. And the only thing that was going through my mind at that point in time is this would be the time when somebody stupid enough to try to rob my store would come in. Right now. This would be it. Because all these guys are in there. You come in there, they would all pull out their guns. And the only fight would be which one of them was going to get credit for arresting them. That would have just been hilarious. But of course, thankfully, nobody tried anything like that. But it would have been a very interesting day that day. Whew. All right. I think I've done enough for this convenience store day, and I'm going to ring the bell and close off the main event. Now it's time for the Spear of the Week. On this convenience store day, I've mentioned many a times that I had plenty of good customers and plenty of bad customers, and I think that the best way, in fact, I have a better, um, what do you call it, Spear of the Week than I thought about, because there was this one executive working for Wawa who I don't know what his name was, and I don't care to know what his name was because, lack of a better term, he was a jerk, and he was, for some reason, very, very agitated, and he was wanting me to move faster than I was. And I did not care for this man at all. I was cutting lunch meat for him. This was during the time when lunch meat was available to be cut. And he was complaining about how it was getting warm. Well, you got to put it in your car, and you got to drive home. And I know you don't live in Lakehurst. So, well, pal, it's going to get warm. That guy is the Spear of the Week. Executive jerk from Wawa. Spear of the Week. Okay, let's see if we can find one of these things and see if I can find out what these three things have in common. Hmm. I did this one already, so we're not going to do that. It's Panthers. Mm, I'm curious about this one, so we're going to figure this one out. This is the one we're going to use. What do these three things have in common? The three things are coffee, cameras, and oatmeal. Coffee, camera, oatmeal. What does coffee, camera, and oatmeal have in common? Obviously, you can consume coffee and oatmeal. Coffee and camera both begin with C. Hmm. You have to brew coffee and you have to heat water up for oatmeal. Hmm. Camera. If it said film, I would say you needed to put the film inside of liquid and let it take some time to get the exposure out. Like you put the liquid in coffee so it can brew, and you put the water in the oatmeal so that it can cook. Hmm. Coffee, camera, oatmeal. That's just it. Because it's not film, it specifically says camera. Hmm. What do those three have in common? Coffee, film, and oatmeal. I really have no idea. I can't even begin to think of it. I was on the right track, but at the same time, I was nowhere near it. What if I said one word that coffee, coffee, camera, and oatmeal have in common, and that thing is instant. Instant coffee, instant camera. You take the picture, and instant oatmeal. You put the water in, boom, boil it, boil the water, and it's done. Instant coffee, instant oatmeal, instant camera. Don't know why I couldn't put those things together, but I didn't. Can't get them all right. And that's a perfect example of that. Whew, boy. Alright, let's see. What question could we possibly. Hmm. Hmm. What does this one say? Is some. Hmm. I'm gonna have to go with. Ooh, here's a good one. I'll go with this one right now. I'll go with this one. The question is, have you ever gotten sick from eating too much? And the answer is yes. 100% yes. Um, Many of you may have known that I've talked a bunch of times about being nearly a competitive eater. And the answer is for sure yes. I have definitely eaten so much where I've felt and have gotten sick. And that isn't even the time that I did it, that I really felt sick, because I've eaten a lot of bacon at one point, and the hardest thing I ever ate was the 26 and a half pancakes. That was a lot, and I still maintained. But it was in 2003 before I ended up going into the hospital. Check those shows out. I talk about my entirety of 2002 and 2003. It's one really big story. But what happened was I ended up getting pancreatitis on top of the sarcoidosis that I had. Now, the pancreatitis, needless to say, the number one symptom of that is actually vomiting and stomach discomfort. Now, I got to a point where I was actually vomiting a lot prior to, but I decided to live up to what my wrestling coach said one time, because I had this point where I could feel that it was constant and it wasn't going away. The nausea was not going away. So I did it. I went to what was the Old Country Buffet, no longer there, and I took my mom and we went, and I did exactly what Coach Tab said: eat and eat and eat and eat until you throw up, and then go back and eat some more. And let me tell you how I had three different sets of food. I ate, ran to the bathroom, threw up, came back out, started eating again, ran to the bathroom, threw up again. Went through a third time, and mom was, yeah, that's enough. Went to the hospital afterwards. But technically that should count, because I did in fact get sick after eating. So I think that would be the one. Yeah, I think so. Alright, now it's time to shut down the show. Um, as always, check me out on Instagram, Philip Henderson 5102. Join us. Join us on our Facebook group. Join us. There's always room for one more. Join the Lip Facebook group. More important than that, like and subscribe here on YouTube to at Phil the Lip. Now, it's time for the words of wisdom. These words of wisdom certainly work when it comes to me working at the convenience store, and sometimes it was very obvious, sometimes it wasn't as obvious. But what I would say, especially because of how much I really didn't like a lot of the times working in the environment, I liked the people, some of the customers, some of the employees. Then there was some that I didn't like, but I didn't like the work in general. It just didn't. It was not what I was supposed to do for the rest of my life, clearly. So, the words of wisdom are: when in a place you don't want to be, act like you don't want to be there. When in a place you don't want to be, act like you don't want to be there. Because literally, there were times when I'd walk into that store and I would be just like, man, I just hate life right now. Then there were times when I would be on my way to the store. Now, mind you, like I said, I worked at a store in Lakehurst, which is on Route 70 to Route 37 is maybe like, I'm going to just say a mile. Probably not that far. But once you get to Route 37, you are 13 miles away from Seaside. And so, I would come to the point sometimes during the summer or winter, and I had to make the decision of whether or not I was going to go to work or was I going to go to Seaside. And sometimes I went to work, more often than not. I don't believe there was many times that I decided to just say, forget this, I'm going to Seaside, because my mind was always like, well, I'll go after work, which I did a lot. And that was probably the only saving grace a lot of times when I made that decision. But boy, there was a lot of times when I was really thinking, you know what, I'm just going to go to Seaside. Forget the work. I'm going straight to Seaside. But a lot of times I didn't. I just walked into work, did what I had to do, and usually went to go get some pizza at the Three Brothers after work. But that was me definitely not wanting to be in a place and acting like I didn't want to be there. And on that note, my name is Phil, and you've just listened to The Lip. I hope I got everything this time.